right, so I'm Scott with Cash Cow Farmer, and today we're going to talk about 6 ways to uncover hidden profit, but just a few housekeeping notes here. You can watch live right now on Meerkat, it's at Cash Cow Farmer, and you can also watch on Periscope at Cash Cow Farmer. And if you have any questions that don't get answered during the presentation, you can just email me, scott@cashcowfarmer.com, or check out our website, cashcowfarmer.com. So I'll erase this. Any questions before we begin? Anybody want to introduce themselves or where they're from, what they farm, anything like that? So, all right, well, we're going to start. And the point of today's program is to help farmers, find different opportunities to save money and make more money. So the first one is interest rate savings. There's a lot of different ways you can save money on interest. And being a farmer, you get access to a lot of really great farm programs. One of them in particular is the commodity loan. So farmers usually have an operating line of credit that they'll borrow from the bank at 4.5%. And then they'll use all that money to put their inputs in. And then after that, they harvest. And if they don't sell all their grain, they're still sitting on that operating cost on all that money with the operating line. And they've got all the grain in the bin. Well, one great way to do this is to go to the FSA office and you can take out a commodity loan. Right now, the interest rates for commodity loan is 1.25%. That just changed from 1.375% in November. So the interest rates are really good. So you can go in and depending on where you're at, like for corn, you can take out 1.83, give or take a nickel or so, $1.83 for every bushel of corn you have in the bin. So that adds up the more grain you have, of course. And then for soybeans, I think it's right around that 4.80. So you can borrow $4.80 for every bushel of soybeans you have in the bin. If you've got 100,000 bushels of corn, 100,000 bushels of soybeans, I mean, you can borrow almost $1 million there and then pay off your operating line because your operating line is probably at 4.5%. So you take 4.5 and you're actually paying 1.25% for your commodity loan. You're going to save, what is that, 3.25% you're going to be saving right there. So that's 3.25% on $500,000 or $100,000. I mean, every $100,000 you're saving $3,025. So that's on an annualized basis, of course, but that adds up big savings. So most farmers with the amount of money you got to borrow today in order to farm, you can save $10,000, $20,000 pretty easily by just doing a commodity loan on your grain until you're ready to market. So that's one way to do it. The other way you can save money on interest rates are buying your machinery or buying farmland while using a loan from the FSA. So the FSA has lots of different programs and their interest rates are way below what you would have for market rate at your bank. So 4.5% on buying machinery at your bank for 7 years versus 1.9 or 1.75 is going to be the FSA loan rate for 7 years or maybe even 9 years. Their terms are way more flexible. Stop into your FSA office anytime you need to spend sizable amount of money or after you've harvested your crops and you got your bins measured and all that stuff, and then you can do a commodity loan and save tremendous money on interest. So that's number one, saving money on interest. All right, number two is field by field economics. So field by field economics, basically this is where kind of the cash cow program shines, is one of our main features is that we show you what the profit or loss is on every field that you farm based on the inputs that it took to produce corn, soybeans, wheat, whatever you're farming. So write that down. Profit per field. Oops. So profit per field. Some fields are going to make you money just about every year. Some fields are not going to make you money every year. And you need to know why that field's not making you money. Is the rent too high? Is it not productive for corn in a $3 or $4 cash market? You know, what is the reasons that you're not going to make money on every field you farm? So the cash cow program will actually show you each field individually. It'll break it down so then you can see, okay, why am I not making money on this field? And you can compare fields by cost for fertilizer, seed, chemical, overhead operating costs, you know, and figure out which fields are your outliers for those costs. And then you can go back and click on those fields and say, okay, well, this is why, you know, this field is so high. Could be a production problem. It could be an expense problem. Are you variable rating? Are you doing everything you can to reduce costs and make that field as efficient as possible? Some fields just won't work for corn when corn's below $4. And that program will tell you, okay, this field right here will cost you this year with all the inputs, 2015, it's going to cost you $4.25 cash to grow a bushel of corn. Well, if you can't get that cash price, you can't grow that corn on. You can't grow corn on that field. And if you don't project that you're going to get that cash price, then I would suggest rotating into other crops, wheat, soybeans, you know, maybe pasturing it out or putting it into a government program. I mean, if worst case scenario, you can put your field into a CRP program, or you can also exercise maybe doing some CSP or equip programs with the FSA. The FSA should be your best friend. I mean, you want to have a good relationship with the NRCS office, the conservation office, and your farm service agency, because there's so many great programs they have for farmers, especially young farmers that are just getting started, because it's so capital intensive and expensive to farm anymore. So make sure you keep those people on speed dial, and anytime you need money or you're having problems making money on a field, see what kind of programs you can put that field in to help pay for land improvements or make that steady cash flow CRP payment or something like that. So that's number 2, profits per field. The more you know about your fields, the more you can diagnose why this field isn't making you money. And the only way you can do that is by knowing your costs of production on each field and then what exactly went into each field. You don't need cash cow to do that. It's easier to do with cash cow than any other program that I've ever worked with, but you can use a spreadsheet, you can use pencil and paper. I mean, you can do just about anything. You can work with your banker. You know, everybody that you work with is you know, your banker, your tax guy, they're all interested in helping you. So make sure you talk to those people and get your field by field production things down. Planting efficiencies is the next one. So planting efficiencies, I mean, how many people will harvest their soybeans? They'll start soybean harvest and they'll be taking out soybeans at 13, 12, and then it'll drop. They'll get a windy day when it's hot and dry and windy, and the next day they go harvest soybeans, it'll be 8% or 6%, even 10%. Well, each percent drop on a 50 bushel soybean field is about a half a bushel. That's just gone in the field based on your moisture drop. So planning your planting season based on how you want to harvest your fields is extremely important. It can pay you a lot of money. So if you're harvesting at 12% and you get a real bad windy day and you've got a shorter variety out there that's a little bit more susceptible to that environment, then chances are the next time you get to it, it's going to be at 8%. Well, you just lost 2 bushel per acre. You know, that's about $20 an acre right there in revenue loss. So one good way to avoid that is when you're working in your planting season, you can start with some of your shorter varieties first. You can put some shorter varieties in the ground first. that way you can expand the time that you're harvesting, and you can start a little bit earlier because those shorter varieties are going to be ready earlier, and then you can have a longer period to start earlier, and then by the time that wind comes, the longer maturities are still sitting in the field, which are they're not as acceptable to that dry down. So if anybody has any questions, just type it in or anything on Meerkat or the program here. Just trying to keep an eye out. I hope I don't miss anybody's questions. Just email me if I miss your questions. So planning is super important, and work with your seed advisor, work with your agronomist, and work with your past experience or some people that have been farming for longer than you have to try and figure out a good planning order so that from first day of soybean harvest, for example, last day of soybean harvest, you're still at above 10% moisture. You hate to be taking out those soybeans at 6% moisture. You're losing a lot of crop. And that can add up. I mean, $20 an acre times 1,000 acres. That's a pretty decent 20 grand right there. You don't want to have that. So number 4 is water under the bridge. And this is something that I see a lot. It's really easy to fix this, except for emotionally, it may be a challenge for some people. I see this a lot, and it's really silly. I'll see a farmer that just hates working with a certain co-op, and it might be the co-op right next door. So he'll drive by the co-op with all of his grain, buy all of his inputs from some other place that maybe doesn't have the labor force to work with the farmer as that co-op, but he'll drive right by the co-op, go to some other co-op another 20 miles away, and he'll be losing $5 to $10 an acre just by not doing business with a certain co-op. So this one's called, number 4 is water under the bridge, meaning that you do business with anybody that is in your best interest to do business with. So make your decisions economically, not emotionally. Everybody makes mistakes. Co-ops, they're really good at screwing up stuff. And especially the bills. The co-op bills are like, you got to be a genius to figure out those bills. They're super complicated. But sit down with the billing person if you're uncomfortable about something. Meet with the manager. More than likely, you're going to be able to work it out. Or if you can't work it out, next time you go to buy inputs, you just say, hey, remember that one time when this didn't get worked out very well? Then let's maybe knock a buck off Power Max or knock $10 a ton off of urea or something like that. They want to do business with you. So make sure that you're doing business with the people that are economically best, not just the people who don't hold grudges, in other words, because it's going to cost you a lot of money to hold that grudge and drive right by the terminal and go to 10, 20 miles down the road. Let's see, number 5. Number 5 is called neighborly love. And there's so many ways that farmers can work together and save money. And I'll give you 2 or 3 examples that I can think of that I've used this year and in the past. So I farm corn and soybeans, and one great way that I use the neighborly love thing to help myself and the neighbor out is one of my neighbors has cattle. So when I harvested a cornfield, of course there's corn that's knocked off and whatnot, especially when it gets drier. So he asked me, "Oh, you're right next door. Can I just put up electric fence and I'll pay you 75 cents to $1 per head per day of cattle that's out in your field eating your corn?" And I'll get your question just a second here. How should one make, okay, we got a question here. How should one make decisions versus cooperatives and private companies when you bet on using dividends as a price advantage, even when it never balances the extra price or lower basis from a cooperative compared to private companies? That's a good question. The co-ops, one of the things that co-ops do a lot. Oh, we just lost Periscope here for some reason. 1 second here. So one thing is that co-ops do a lot of the times, they'll say, oh, well, our price isn't the same, but you get dividends down the road for equity and ownership and all this stuff. That's a great question. You know, I always make them say, show me the money. You know, I don't care about, nobody cares about the dividend and all this stuff, because the dividend is risky. If it's 10%, you know, maybe then it'd be worth talking about, but usually the dividends are only, you know, 2 to 5%. And so I never even, when I'm negotiating with co-ops, I tell them, here's the co-op price, and here's a private company. Here's a Hefty Seed, for example. The Hefty Brothers has a satellite outfit in my area, and they have very competitive prices on chemical. So as example, I will quote Hefty Seed, and I will quote my local co-op on price. And if the co-op doesn't beat it, I don't buy it from them. Even though I like doing business with them, they're handy and everything, and it may be a little more work for me to drive and pick up the chemical myself rather than have it delivered. You know, I never negotiate with the thinking that I'm going to save 5% with some kind of imaginary dividend down the road. That's icing on the cake. I wouldn't think about it. I wouldn't negotiate that. I wouldn't even accept that in negotiations with co-ops, is that, oh, you're going to save 5% on your partnership dividend. You know, that's a good question, and that's how I do it. Everybody can do it a different way, but I just tell them, quit talking about the dividend. Nobody cares about that. I don't even think about it. But anyway, so the neighborly love thing. So the cattle guy, he gets a benefit because he's in the field eating the corn. His cattle's eating the corn, and I'm getting another, you know, if he's got 150 head of cattle in there, and I had a really good cornfield, and I'm getting $1 per head per day, and it's a 150 acre field, I mean, that's an extra $1 per acre every day. So if he has the cattle in there for 25 days or a month or 2 months, I mean, you're looking at somewhere between $25 to $30 an acre. I mean, that can add up a lot over time, and he benefits because he gets all the feed from the cattle for a cheap price, and then I benefit because there's no volunteer corn when I rotate that into soybeans, and I can save whatever that costs, probably around $8 to $10 an acre for the volunteer corn chemical. So that's tremendously beneficial for both parties. That's a good one. Another example of the neighborly love is grain storage. So this year, got about 300,000 bushels worth of grain storage on my farming operation, and I was only going to use 100,000 of it, and I had 100,000 worth of like really convenient storage where there's an elevator leg and all this other stuff, really handy. So what I did is I called the neighbors and I said, hey guys, I've got 100,000 bushels worth of storage in 4 different bin sizes, a 40 and a 30, and you know, these are the bin sizes. And I was like, you guys want to store some corn, beans, whatever. I mean, I'll work with you on price. I've got sensors that hang down in there, and they monitor the grain so that there's low risk of the grain going out of condition. So they were like, yeah, that would be great. So at my co-op, at the local co-op where we sell the grain, it's 5 cents per month to store their grain. And I was like, how about we do it for 3 cents at my elevator? I'll unload your trucks and I'll load your trucks, because you're going to have a little extra cost transporting, you know, loading and unloading another time, but it's pretty efficient, the setup I got. And so it saved them 40% on their storage costs for grain they didn't have forward contracted. I mean, that adds up to a lot. You put that over a couple 100,000 bushels or 50,000 bushels even. I mean, you're saving 2 cents on 50,000 bushels. That's what, $1,000 right there easily. And then also the drying costs at the elevator, it's 5 cents per percentage point. So if they're hauling it at 18 and they dry it down to 15, that's 15 cents per bushel cost in drying. So I said, well, let's just do it for 4 cents. So that saves them another 20% right there on their drying costs. So, I mean, that's another great way to do the neighborly love thing. Also, a lot of farmers, you know, they might have extra capacity for chemical application or fertilizing or planting. I don't know how many years I've got behind on planting or something like that, and I've had to call a neighbor and say, hey, can I rent your planter? Or can you do a few custom acres? Can you do a couple custom acres of corn for me? And that's really helped. So just a question here about how often did you moisture test the incoming corn? I tested every load and saved a sample of every load. It just got a bunch of Ziploc baggies, you know, and then I took a sample out of every load, about a gallon Ziploc baggie worth. And then I've got a moisture sensor that I tested every load. So that's how we did it. Okay, the next point here. And that's Ziploc baggie. Yeah, and you can throw it in the Ziploc baggie, and I just write the name and date and time on every load that came in on the Ziploc baggie. So it worked. I mean, it was 100,000 bushels worth of storage that I contracted out, and you know, that's about 100 Ziploc baggies, because each truck was about 1,000 bushels. So 100 Ziploc bags, no big deal. Man, I'm struggling with ends today. So number 6 is negotiate. And let me answer a question before I get right into this one. Did I say a minimum of 4 months? Yeah, I did have a minimum. I can't remember what my minimum was, but I had figured out my labor costs of getting that grain in and out of the bin, plus, you know, the cost of the facility. And I think I did have a 4-month minimum, if I remember right. I'll have to look at the contracts that I did with the guys, but it was 4 months, and it was kind of, I mean, I wrote up a little contract, and it was kind of a handshake deal. You know, we had it in paper, you know, I'm just like, look, if anything comes up, you know, we have grain go out of condition, you know, I'll let you know right away, and we can get it moving and stuff like that. So number 6, negotiate. This is where you're going to save a lot of money. And this is where you can drive the cost of production down. Below $3 is where you want to be for producing corn next year, below $3 cash. And how you do this is, anybody who does any business with farmer stuff, I mean, I spent 1 to 2 months every fall negotiating prices for fertilizer and chemical next year and seed prices. So I'll go in, I'll start the negotiations and say, give me your best price for Roundup, Power Max, you know, all the chemicals that I'm going to use, all the fertilizers I'm going to use. So that's step 1. I go in there and say, this is what I need next year. Give me your best price. And I'll say, talk to whoever you got to talk to. I want your best price. And so I go back in about a week, you know, 2-3 days to a week. And then I'll say, okay, well, this is the volume. This is exactly how much I'm going to need of each one of these products. Now, give me a better price, because, you know, the volume is pretty decent here, you know. And then I ask them. I do quote both generic and regular chemical companies. And some of the generic companies you got to use a little bit more. So the savings aren't always there if you calculate, you know, additional ounces per unit. So yeah, I do quote both. I use some generic, you know, it all depends on what I'm doing on that process. When it's a very important process, like if I'm going on corn, I use Halex or Lumax, where I just want one application and that's it. I'm not going to go generic on that. But if I'm coming back on round 3 on soybeans, for example, we had some weeds get out of control and they're harder to kill every year, then I might go with a generic Roundup and, you know, maybe some generic water conditioner and just try and hammer them out a little bit better. But yeah, for my first passes, I rarely use generic because I want those first passes to be super effective. But that's the way I do it. You know, there's no right or wrong way, just whatever works for you and most economical. So second time, go in there with the volume and say, this is the volume we're going to do. You know, can you give me a better price? But that first time, you've not only gone into the local co-op, you've gone into the Hefty Brothers seed, you've gone into everybody else that sells those products. You know, you probably, within your farming operation, you should have 2 to 4 co-op choices within 30 miles. And then you should have, 2 to 4 other alternative private companies, whether it's like Pro Ag or Hefty Brothers or Popular in my area, South Dakota, and a couple other companies. So you want to make sure that you've got bids from everybody that sells what you want to buy. And then you start putting them against each other. You usually have your favorite 1 or 2 people that you want to do business with. And it's like, in the conversation usually goes into, okay, I want to do business with you guys, but you're way overpriced. I mean, how can you cannot beat these Hefty guys? I mean, you're a big co-op and you're doing tons of business and you guys have, all this fancy stuff. And how come you can't beat the Hefty guys? Let's at least beat them. Let's at least tie the Hefty guys, and then I can get the chemical for that price. So spend a lot of time negotiating, and each time come back with another offer. So if they are at $16 a gallon for Roundup and you want to pay $15 a gallon, for example. So they said, okay, so $16 a gallon. And you say, okay, how about I pay you in December, before the first of the year, I pay you now, and I pick it all up and store it on my farm. Well, you can do 15 then. Oh, well, then they don't have to put it in their bulk tanks. They don't have to mess around, so offer different things you can do. Certainly if you got full-time guys year round, they can be, hauling Roundup to the farm and doing things like that. So that's kind of the 6 ways that I had thought of to help increase uncover hidden profit on your farming operation. There's definitely more than 6. There's so many different ways you can make money, and one very important one is with having a grain marketing plan. And that's extremely important, is knowing your production costs and having a grain marketing plan. So with Cash Cow, one of the biggest challenges that we have with Cash Cow is data management. And farmers will sign up for Cash Cow and they'll love the program and they'll throw a field in or two and then we won't hear from them or something like that. And they're like, I just don't have time to put all the data in, because you got to put in your prices, and then you got to put in your applications and stuff like that. And it's like, well, it takes a little bit of time. Yeah, you want to spend about an hour a week on it, which an hour a week for the return. I mean, what you pay for Cash Cow is nothing compared to the amount of money you can return on it. So I mean, I guarantee you that you will return twice your money that you spent on Cash Cow for year one, and then year 2 and 3, it'll be astronomical. So we're offering at Cash Cow data management services where we will actually once a month do a call with the farmers and we'll collect all their data, whether we got to go to the co-op to get their prices or to their agronomist to get that stuff, or they got to mail us their chip from their monitor so that we can put it into our program and figure out what they applied on every field. I mean, whatever it takes, we will get the data in the program so that you have solid, reliable numbers to look at profitability for your farming operation. And then secondly, in addition to that, we offer consulting where we will look at all your different farm programs. We'll look at your debt and what your debt interest rates are at. We'll basically sit down and analyze your farm just like a consultant will help, IBM figure out one of their manufacturing arms, why it's not profitable. We'll sit down with your farm and we'll figure out where we can save you money and where we can turn every field into profitability. So anyway, for these 2 services, there's a fee, a monthly program for that. So there's the software, number 1. And the software is very inexpensive. Most people can just buy the software, and then if they like doing the data themselves, they just do that, because you actually learn a lot when you put your farm data in there. You put your expenses in there, you put all this other stuff in there. You learn a lot about your farming operation. So software, and that is 25 fields. If you're less than 25 fields, it's $749 per year, which is, I mean, in farming terms, that's like an oil change on your quad track. I mean, next to nothing. And if you're greater than 25 fields, it's $14.99 per year, which is also very, very inexpensive. I mean, if you're greater than 25 fields, you're probably farming over 4,000 acres. I mean, you're looking at a few pennies per acre is what the program costs you, and it'll save you that just in time. So that's one thing. So data is number two, the data management program, and what we offer for that, it's $10 per field each month, because every month there's data that gets inputted into the system. Whether it's a big month like November and December are big months for us. We spend a lot of time updating harvested yields, and then we're not only doing harvested yields, but in December we're also doing prepaid prices, things like that. It just takes a lot of time, and you could hire some high school kid to input your data, but probably going to be wrong. And by the time you get done, pulling your hair out from training them and they figure out exactly how to do it, I mean, you're retired by then. So data management is something that, I mean, hire consultants for everything that you're not an absolute genius at. Farmers are great at operations. The business side, I mean, we can help. We're here to help. That's what we do. So that's the data management side. So it's consulting and advisory. Consulting and advisory is the third tier, and that's for the farmer that wants to make sure that every field, I mean, this is, you want to be the all-star farmer. You want to make sure that every field is the maximum profitability. You're taking advantage of every single opportunity for farm programs. You're taking advantage of the best debt instruments for farmers. You're maxing out every program that's available to farmers through the FSA, the NRCS, all that stuff. And we sit down and we look at your farm. We help you with the cash flow statements, with the balance sheets, with everything. I mean, there's no way that we can't help, every farmer with the consulting service, and help them improve and make sure that there's profits across every single field that they farm. So those are the three tiers of help that we provide for farmers. All three of them are inexpensive. If you did the whole package, you would still be about $1 an acre. I mean, $1 an acre, and I could guarantee you that we're going to return, $5 an acre at least in revenue to your farming operation. And it's not all about, just crunching the numbers. You got to understand what those numbers mean and how to act on those numbers. And the numbers don't lie. They tell you the truth, what's going on in your field, why are you losing money, and that sort of stuff. So anyway, I got another question here about the bulk tanks, if they're profitable or not, and just for Roundup. So that's a good question. I mean, anytime you have enough farmland and fields in order to be able to do bulk chemical and bulk fertilizer and stuff, you're definitely going to save them money. I would say you'd have to talk to some of your local, that would be a more personal question. You have to talk to some of your local chemical suppliers and say, hey guys, if I put in a bulk tank, would I be able to save some money? I have some neighbor farmers that are actually satellite dealers for certain ag chemical companies, and they save money that way. And then they also have, closer to the rural farmers chemical options for that dealership. So that seems to be kind of a win-win. Rather than bulk tanks, you could meet with one of your local chemical guys and say, hey, we're interested in being a satellite dealer for you. If I can get a little bit better price on my stuff, and then try and push some of your product on some neighbors. That way, the sprayer, they're in the middle of a sprayer, they run out of something, they don't have to drive to town and back. They can just come over to my yard, or I can deliver it to them as well. So yeah, there's tons of different ways to do chemical and decrease your prices and make extra money there. So anyway, is there any other questions? Okay, another question on bulk storage. LP, dry fert, liquid fert. What's the first investment? Found a 12,000 gallon LP tank. When you're storing bulk, whether it's bulk fuel, bulk chemical, bulk fertilizer, you have to build containment systems At least that's how it used to be a year or two ago when I built a big chemical or a big fuel station. You know, it can be a pain in the butt. And one of the beauties about working with the co-op is that you don't have to worry about that crap. I mean, if you get a hole in one of your tanks and you don't notice it for a week, and if you go to pump fertilizer out of there, 28% fertilizer, and there's none in there, boy, you just lost all the savings for your entire life on that thing. So yeah, I think that doing stuff like that is a great way to save money in the short run. But don't forget, I mean, there's a lot of risk that goes with storing all that stuff on the farm. I mean, you don't want to have this huge bulk tanks of diesel fuel, and then, you know, some hunter just is hunting and hits the diesel fuel tank, and there goes all your fuel. You know, I don't think you can insure stuff like that. I actually had a guy this spring, he accidentally left the pump on the chemical tanks. I had 2 chemical tanks. He accidentally left the pump on it was Roundup, and I think it was Class Act, a water conditioner. And I just filled them. It was 350 gallons, just pump full. And he calls me. He's like, "Hey, there's no chemical in those tanks you brought out." And I'm just like, "Sure, they're full up. What are you talking about?" And so he's like, "Oh, I left the pump on, and an hour later it had pumped out 350 gallons of Roundup and Class Act onto the ground in the field." Which, what do you do? It's a $15,000 loss. I mean, you can't fire the guy because it was a simple mistake, but at the same time, you know, it sometimes can bite you in the butt to have bulk stuff like that on your farm running around. So anyway, any more questions? Feel free to fire questions. I'm just going to take a couple minutes and let anybody with questions go ahead and ask them, whether you're on Periscope or no, I'm not. I guess Periscope dropped off. Sorry about the Periscope, guys, but we got Meerkat going yet. And then we've got also the YouTube Google Plus deal. And then so anyway, the most important piece of farm equipment on your farm, a financial calculator. This thing will make you a lot of money in time if you know how to use financial calculator and you know how to. I mean, the best thing with financial calculator, it helps you with your cash flow. Cash flow is super important, super important. The last thing you want to do, good businesses, they don't go out of business because they're not selling at a profit. They go out of business because they run out of cash. That's why you file for bankruptcy, because you don't have cash to meet your short-term liabilities. Second most important piece of farm equipment, a regular calculator. These things will make you more money than your tractor, than your combine, than all that stuff. Oh, another good thing that popped into my mind, another way to uncover hidden profit is if anybody's ever heard of Machinery Link. Machinery Link is a nice way to monetize machinery that's just sitting around. If you got a 4-wheel drive tractor, you can put it on Machinery Link, or you know, a combine, you can put it on Machinery Link, and then you rent it out to some other farmer and you monetize that machinery. So that way it can be in the winter months or in the summer months when you're not using certain pieces of machinery, you can send them on down the road to some other farmer and he can use them. And then you can get payments on that. So that's really, really handy. So, well, there's not any further questions. Email me if you have any questions before or after this thing popped up. You didn't get them answered. My email is Scott, SCOTT, at cashcowfarmer.com. So anybody that has the link for the YouTube video on this, the live YouTube video, that'll just be up there forever now, and you'll be able to go back and rewatch this program or do whatever you'd like there. So again, thanks everybody for the time, and if you have any questions, feel free to email. Sign up for the 30-day free trial of the software program. It's not going to hurt you. It'll just check it out, see how it works. You know, I'll probably contact you and see how it's going and help you out best I can. So we're here for the farmer. We're here to help farmers make more money. You know, what made you put, I just had a question here. What made you put the cow in Cash Cow Farmer? It sounds good. Well, eventually we will have cattle and hogs and potentially turkeys and chickens and livestock in the Cash Cow program. But you know, when I started Cash Cow, I had to pitch the company in front of a group of people to find developers. It was at a startup weekend, which is kind of like a Shark Tank little event, for entrepreneurs that want to start a technical business. And so when I first did it, like Cash Cow was the name that popped up. And so like Cash Cow Farmer, and the more importantly, the URL was available. So when the URL is available and the name's fairly catchy, you just go with it. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for your time. Check out the 30-day trial. Email me if you have any questions. Call me. Numbers on the website. So, all right. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.